Tony and the Tin Shack, written and illustrated by Crystal Hamann. Tony Macmillan was an ordinary boy with an ordinary poor life. He lived in a tin shack in a village called Tabankulu. He lived with his mother and little sister Anne. The family was battling after Tony's dad had disappeared when Tony was just 5 years old. Food was scarce, and every evening Tony and Anne had to go to bed with growling tummies. The tin shack in which Tony lived was the tiniest ever seen, but Tony loved it. It was cozy, small, and contained everything he needed. He loved his tin shack very much, even though it had cracked walls, a broken window, and deep dark stains on the ceiling. To him this was his safe haven, far away from all the hustle and bustle from the village, and a special place he felt the most secure. On most days, Tony would crawl up into a little ball under his favorite piece of furniture, the wooden kitchen table. This is what he loved most about the tin shack. It was small enough for him to pretend he was in his own world, filled with all the delight you can imagine. It gave him so much happiness, as this was a world quite different to the world we know. It had a brown, milky river filled with a chocolate milkshake that anyone could scoop a handful of. The majestic mountain smelled of strawberry candy floss that would melt at the touch of a tongue. The grass was edible. Even the sunflower pods were made of delicious vanilla coconut ice. Tony loved being here, but the sound of his growling stomach always woke him up just when he was about to take a bite. One very hot and sunny day, while Tony was walking his long way home from school, he dreamt of returning to his tin shack, where he could escape into his wonderful world and sip on some creamy, ice-cold chocolate milkshake. But when Tony got home, there was something strange going on. Where his tin shack used to stand stood a modest brick house. Tony was sure he had taken the wrong turn, but when he looked around, he saw his neighbors were still there. This must be my house, thought Tony. So he entered with a heavy heart. As he came through the door, sitting on the wooden table, was Mother and Anne. The table was fully laden with food Tony hadn't seen in a while. There was delicious roast chicken, roast potatoes, creamy mushroom sauce, and smoldering golden sweet corn. Tony couldn't believe his eyes. He suddenly started to cry. All he wanted was his tin shack back with cracked walls, the broken window, and deep dark stains in the ceiling. But the smell of the food stopped his crying, and his mouth started to water, with bits of saliva creeping down the edges of his lips. Just then a man came walking in through the front door. He looks very familiar, thought Tony. Hello, Tony, said the strange man. Tony knew him from a distant memory. I'm your dad. Don't you remember me? Tony couldn't believe his eyes, and instead of feeling sad for the first time in his life, he felt the heaviness in his heart lift. Come, child, come eat. You must be starving, said the man. The family sat down in silence and started to eat. Tony looked around the little wooden table at his family, and was overcome with joy at the sight of gleaming happy faces. It was at that exact moment that Tony realized his life had changed for the better, and he didn't need his tin shack to feel safe anymore. The end.